Since all this came out, April's kids have stayed safe under Jaime's roof. She says they're hanging in there, but some days the grief hits them like a ton of bricks. Through it all, Jaime hasn't stopped thanking the people who stood by her and her family. But the fight isn't over yet. Now she's pushing hard to get Donovan's charges upgraded. I'm fighting to get these charges bumped up because reckless homicide doesn't even come close to justice. It needs to be murder 1, and they should tack on child endangerment 2, she said flatly. She's already burned through 2 district attorneys and is waiting on a 3rd to take the reins. I won't rest until the charges match the horror of what he actually did to my girl. If this story hooked you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We drop new true crime deep dives every single night. Stay sharp and watch your back. July 28th, 2023 started out just like any other morning for April Holt. She sipped her coffee, jotted down some thoughts in her diary, and hung out with her kids. However, just a couple of hours down the line, the day would spiral into a complete nightmare. Her 7-year-old son, Denzel, later mentioned that he heard his folks getting into a heated shouting match behind the locked bathroom door. He couldn't quite make out the specific words, but he got a bad feeling in his gut that things were wrong. Then, out of nowhere, the house went dead silent. A little while later, his dad, Donovan, got him dressed, fed him some breakfast, and sent him off to check on his mother. The scene Denzel walked into that morning was something no child should ever see. By the time the ambulance crew showed up, April was already gone. They rushed her to the emergency room, but the doctors found 0 brain activity. Her mom, Jaime, got there as fast as humanly possible, demanding explanations, but the story she heard didn't add up. Law enforcement quickly labeled April's passing as a suicide and shut the book on the investigation. Jaime, however, wasn't buying that story for a second. Once she started digging into the real events of that day, she found disturbing clues. Evidence proving the truth was miles away from the official police report. April Holt had just turned 29 in early July of 2023. Born and raised in Antioch, she had already knocked out some major goals in her short time on Earth. She worked as a freelance lash artist and had made a boss move by quitting her regular 9-to-5 to launch her own brand. She took real pride in the lifestyle she built and loved showing off her wins to her followers online. "Happy 29th birthday to yours truly," she captioned a selfie. "I am so blessed to see another year. I have been on this planet for over 10,000 days. More than anything else, April lived for her 2 babies, 11-year-old Serenity and 7-year-old Denzel. She was a super mom who loved hard, constantly posting clips of the fun time she had with her little ones. Her TikTok feed was a vibe, packed with spiritual quotes and motivational speeches, pushing her fans to chase the life they really wanted. "I just hope this sends some good vibes to anyone watching," she mentioned in one clip. "Go have an awesome day on purpose. Be deliberate and choose growth over being perfect." Yet, April's social media game wasn't just about hype and inspiration. It also showcased some deeply personal and vulnerable moments. She opened up about the battles she fought, like the isolation she felt while being homeschooled as a kid. But she carved her own path, leaning into her independence and finding herself during her teenage years. She also dropped occasional updates about her marriage to 33-year-old Donovan Holt. Their romance kicked off as a friendship before turning into love, a wedding, and a family. April had Serenity when she was just a teen, and later, she and Donovan had their son, Denzel. Their partnership was definitely a roller coaster ride. They endured breakups, money problems, and even some scary health scares along the way. Through it all, April framed their story as a comeback tale, proving they could survive the storms and come out tougher. Her feed was always a mix of grit, glam, and total honesty. In one of her last uploads, she admitted she was barely keeping her head above water emotionally. "Let's chat about how I am gonna fake it until I make it," she told the camera. "I put on fresh lash extensions because I had a total meltdown the other night and ripped my old ones out. I think I can handle this. If not, then I am just crying for absolutely no reason." She went on to say, "I have been juggling a lot lately, and I can honestly say I am in a depressed state. I feel totally buried. I know that I am just attracting more bad energy by staying in this headspace. So I have to pull myself out of it. I have done this before. This isn't my first rodeo." When the detectives told Jaime they were closing the file, she saw red. They told her there were no other leads to chase, that they had made their final call. She flat out refused to agree. When they said they were shelving April's case, that everyone signed off on it, I stood up, walked out the door, and told them, I am not done here. I am going to keep digging. Jaime knew her daughter's heart better than anybody. She knew April was a fighter. She was tough. She would never leave her babies behind. Not by choice. Somebody took her life, and Jaime was convinced she knew exactly who did it. Just 2 weeks before she died, April had filed for divorce. It wasn't the first time she and Donovan had hit a wall. Their marriage had been rocky, filled with drama that had driven a wedge between them in the past. Years back, they split up for 3 whole years before getting back together. In an old video, Donovan opened up about their break. So the deal is we are splitting up. That is the choice we made. She is my best friend. I still got love for her. We share a kid, so we are still gonna be in each other's faces all the time. Right now, splitting up is the healthiest move for both of us. April stood beside him, nodding, her face a blank slate. This wasn't some messy, hateful breakup. We don't need that kind of drama. He's been my best friend way before we dated, before the wedding, before all of it. So that bond isn't going anywhere. Still, their dynamic remained complicated. Even after splitting, they didn't cut the cord. Publicly, they kept up the act. United front, best buds. Privately, though, things were messy. Did their second shot at romance just spiral back into poison? Or did trying to fix things actually lead to something way darker? Jaime was hell-bent on finding out what really happened. Online, April and Donovan loved posting about forgiveness, open talks, and growing together. Fans saw a couple built on bouncing back and really getting each other, but off camera, cracks were forming. April rarely posted the ugly parts of their marriage on TikTok. By July 2023, the vibe changed. She wasn't just thinking about leaving anymore, she was done. She told her mom it was over for good. No getting back together this time. Donovan seemed to make his own choice too. Soon after, Jaime found out something that rattled her to the core. Only a week before April died, Donovan slipped off his wedding band and sold it at a pawn shop. Jaime didn't see that as a spur-of-the-moment thing. It felt calculated, like he'd already checked out way before the tragedy hit. Right around then, April posted a TikTok lip-syncing to that viral sound, grinning as she mouthed, "I don't think I'm the drama." Maybe I am. Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain. Back then, it just looked like harmless fun. Looking back, those words hit different. Did she know how creepy that clip would seem later on? On the morning of July 28th, the day everything went wrong, April started out totally normal. She stuck to the usual routine she'd done a million times. Up early, coffee in hand, she sat quietly, journaling, getting her thoughts out before the day really started. She gave her 7-year-old Denzel a big squeeze and a kiss, just like any mom starting a regular Tuesday. 0 red flags popped up during those first few hours. Then the mood flipped. Sometime that morning, she and Donovan went into the bathroom and a chat turned into a screaming match. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but Denzel heard them yelling. He pressed his ear to the door, trying hard to figure out what was going on in there. He couldn't make out the specific words they were throwing at each other, but the rage and tension in their tones were loud and clear. Scared but curious, Denzel got down on the floor to peek under the door crack. Through that tiny sliver, he spotted both of their feet standing on the tiles. Seeing that didn't help much. Freaked out by the fighting, he ran back to his room. A bit later, Donovan walked in. He coolly got the kid dressed, fed him, and then told him to go see his mom. That's when Denzel found April passed out and not moving. They dialed 911 right away. By the time Jaime got to the hospital to see her girl, things looked hopeless. Doctors said April had 0 brain activity and no blood flow. Technically, her brain was completely dark, no function, no response, nothing. For 6 agonizing hours, nobody knew exactly how this happened. Stuck in a nightmare of confusion, Jaime waited, dying for some answers. She grabbed at any scrap of news that could explain why her daughter was in that state. Then she heard something that froze her blood. They found April with a plastic bag over her head. That detail was gruesome and screamed foul play immediately. Meanwhile, Donovan left the hospital twice to go back to their apartment for reasons nobody really understood. Him taking off during such a crisis just made Jaime more suspicious. On July 31st, 2023, April was officially gone. Jaime wasn't about to let her daughter's case get swept under the rug. She set her heart on finding the truth, regardless of the brutal road stretching out before her. The aftermath turned into a devouring battle, a crusade that would completely reshape her future. Since the cops and the DA dragged their feet on giving the case another look, Jaime changed up her game plan. If the law refused to step up, she would take her plea straight to the people. She started hitting up regional papers, community pillars, and folks with a massive online reach. She hunted for anybody ready to spotlight April's tragedy and squeeze the system for answers, but it was a steep climb right from the start. With the file stamped shut, that final status built a stone wall she just could not seem to break through. Broadcasters in the area ghosted her calls, and not a single big network wanted to touch the story of April's passing. Every silence on the other end and every snubbed plea just piled onto her mounting aggravation. Brushed off and ignored, Jaime took to the internet to scream her pain, posting a tearful question, wondering why she could not grasp the reality. Did I mess up somewhere? It has been 14 months, and not a single station in this city has run a segment on my girl. Not Channel 2, 4, 7, or even 5. Absolutely nobody. And even the stars I messaged have left me on red. But Jaime did more than just rant online or beg the crowd. She decided to get her hands dirty. She filed the paperwork to pull the entire docket, dead set on combing through every single page, note, and recording on her own. She scrutinized the data with a fine-tooth comb, hunting for anything that did not add up or clues the detectives missed. On top of that, she lodged a formal grievance with the oversight committee in town. She insisted they come clean and own up to exactly how they managed the investigation into her daughter. Driven by heartbreak and grit, her stubbornness finally started to move the needle. Eventually, the local precinct caved and consented to run a fresh inquiry into how April died. To Jaime, it tasted like a minor yet crucial win, evidence that her refusal to quit had sparked a rethink. 4 months down the line, the squad wrapped up their probe and dropped a 47-page dossier, which Jaime opened with guarded optimism. She prayed the verdict might flip this time around, but once the results landed, the bottom line had not budged an inch. The status of the incident stayed put, and the prosecutor was not going to chase any indictment. Even with the fresh eyes on the evidence, the government position held firm. Jaime had exhausted her spirit in hours fighting for this redo, but fairness still seemed miles away. Regardless, she would not wave the white flag. While that 47-page document failed to shift the legal ruling on the fatality, it gifted her something different: raw data. It laid out the nitty-gritty, the chronologues, and detective notes that Jaime had never laid eyes on before. She vowed to dissect every single sheet of that file with unwavering intensity. Clocking hour upon hour, she pored over the text, scrutinizing every sentence and claim, looking for cracks in the story. Days melted into weeks and then months as she tried to reconstruct the truth from the scraps they gave her. Throughout it all, Jaime stayed fiercely loyal to her grandbaby. She made sure Serenity and Denzel got into therapy, knowing they needed expert help to handle that kind of trauma. She talked openly about the heavy toll her daughter's passing took on their whole household. Bad dreams haunted the kids, jolting them awake in terror, leaving Jaime and her spouse up until dawn, calming them down. They provided a safe harbor whenever the panic became too much to bear. To help mend her own broken heart, Jaime started putting pen to paper to vent her sorrow. She released a memoir called Grieving Through Grace, where she laid bare her walk through the valley of death and the faith that kept her standing. But her mission went way past just looking inward. Jaime turned into a loud voice against intimate partner violence, using her own nightmare to shine a light on how toxicity manifests. She stressed that mistreatment is not always black and blue or fitting the usual mold. It can be quiet, mental, or buried deep inside a home. Meanwhile, she faced another gut-wrenching hurdle, keeping the kids united. A few months after April passed, Donovan packed up and moved down to Texas. He made it clear he wanted Denzel to come stay with him in the Lone Star State. Jaime recalled the heavy burden of driving Denzel to visit his dad, admitting later through the pain that she simply could not go through with it. Plus, Denzel had zero desire to go anywhere else. He held on to her for dear life, crying his eyes out and squeezing tight like he was scared she'd vanish. "I'll do whatever it takes to stay right here with you," he begged, his voice breaking with every word. It was the sound of a kid who'd seen too much pain and couldn't handle saying goodbye again. Jaime knew people whispered that she might have coached him or twisted his feelings, but she shut that down fast. She stood firm that his terror was 100% real. Meanwhile, things with Donovan went from bad to worse. The vibe turned ugly and toxic as the custody battle heated up and old grudges boiled over. Then, in April 2024, Jaime dropped a bomb that left her followers stunned. She told everyone she'd been slapped with a gag order. Because of the judge's ruling, she was banned from posting any more details about her daughter's case online. The voice she used to demand answers and rally support was suddenly silent. Even though she couldn't speak out publicly, her drive for justice didn't waver one bit. She just kept grinding in private. At the start, the cops claimed April didn't have a single scratch on her, but Jaime wasn't buying it, not after what she saw with her own eyes at the hospital. She saw bruises plain as day, and when the final autopsy came back, it proved she was right. The report listed marks on April's neck, her thighs, and all the way down to her ankles. On top of the bruises, there was a deep cut on her inner thigh that raised a lot of red flags. That plastic bag they found over April's head had just one clear set of fingerprints on it. The duct tape used to seal that bag told the exact same story. Those prints didn't match April. They were a perfect match for Donovan Holt. Armed with that proof, Jaime confronted Donovan in September, and he dropped a confession that blew her mind. Jaime took that tape straight to the detectives without wasting a second. She handed over the recording, betting everything that it would finally force them to act. Thanks to that breakthrough, they officially revised April's autopsy report. They changed the cause of death to homicide, which was a massive game changer for the investigation. On September 20th, 2024, Nashville police announced they'd grabbed Donovan Holt down in San Antonio. Cops said he spilled the beans to detectives about his role in ending April's life. A grand jury indicted him on charges of reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, and filing a fake report. They hauled Donovan from Texas back to Tennessee, where he was locked up on a $75,000 bond. While waiting for his court date on October 23rd, he sat down with the cold case team. In that interrogation room, he confirmed the exact nightmare scenario Jaime had suspected all along. He admitted that during a fight, he lost it and strangled April in a blind rage. Then, trying to cover his tracks and fool the cops, he dragged her body into the shower. He put a plastic bag over her head and taped it tight to make it look like something else. After doing all that, he calmly went and made lunch for their son like nothing happened. He waited until Denzel finished his meal before telling him to check on mom and finally calling 911.